obviously talking about the coils as well, across what you would kind of consider maybe the gold standard product, the full body mat and the Celerate, there's 13 coils.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think having the full body and the localized is important? Because we talk a lot about having both options available. Like it's always good to have the full body mat, but if you can have both, why was that something that you actually wanted to make a really kind of an essential part of the product?
Yeah, so like people, there's a lot of localized PEMF devices. There's a lot of full body PEMF devices, and there isn't too many that do the both together. It's a really key factor because the two products are very different. They have different effects on the body. Full body mat is very, very good for circulation. And, with the circulation comes more oxygen delivery, comes, all these different things. With the localized products, you're intensifying it in that area. You're creating an environment in the body to heal in that area. So, but one doesn't work as effectively without the other. So if you've just got a localized device in the area, it's going to be working in that area, but it's not going to have the support from the full body application. Same as the other way around. If you've got a full body mat, but you've got a knee injury or you've got a shoulder injury or something, you want to also target and localize it in that area. So having the benefit of both, and also, like you mentioned, 13 coils in the complete Celerate, 12 in the mat, because that's the other thing that a lot of these PEMF devices will do is they've only got 4 coils in there, or they've only got 6 coils in there. You lose intensity from a PEMF coil. I think it's not exact with every device because it also depends how the coil's set up. But as a general rule of thumb, it's about 0.5 centimeter half-life. So every 0.5 centimeter you go, you lose half the intensity. So, if you've got a mat that starts at 100 gauss, it doesn't take long before you've lost a lot of that intensity. So again, it's something that needs to be taken into consideration, that you've got full coverage and not only a full mat, you've seen where the coils are on those mats to give you a true full coverage.
Yeah, and we definitely won't go into the drop-off kind of equations in this episode. That could be a whole another episode, which we probably will do later on down the line. If you listen to any of our past ones, it's always the bias of art law and the...
So there's the inverse square law.
Yep, that's the other one. And yeah, that could be its whole other episode, which we will go into later on. But you spoke about there as well a little bit about how the intensity and the intensity differences. I know a lot of the time I hear like customers on the phone always asking like, why is 150? Why is 100? Was that a choice that you made on purpose, or what led you to create 50 and 100, or even just really overall select that range?
Yeah, so that was really intentional as well, because we did our own research when we were developing it as to what we need the intensity to be, or what's the most effective intensities. And when looking and comparing so many different PEMF studies, these were the ones that were using those intensities and getting the best results. So we did our own independent kind of conclusion, but then we also found a study that did its own collection of studies that also came to the conclusion that between 10 and 100 Gauss was the most effective range when you compare it with the amount of studies that are done and with the results that they got. So it was intentional. Again, when we talk about the primitive PEMF devices that maybe limit yourself, when they're in the range of 1 Gauss, that sort of thing, there is a reason why you want to go higher. It's not to say that the 1 Gauss systems don't work. It worked for me and it works for a lot of other people. But you might hit a ceiling a bit earlier and you might kind of peak the benefit. So having the range of going up to 50 and 100 Gauss, I think for me was really, really important, and, fit within the understanding of where the studies were and where the results were coming.
Yeah, and exactly. Just going on to your point about the lower Gauss systems maybe having a bit of a ceiling, I feel like sometimes people might think we're just saying that as like just a way to maybe promote more of the medium intensity. But like the amount of people I've even had just at shows come and say, oh, I've got a device that's like 2 Gauss and, I used it for 3 months. It was great. I've had some really great benefits. But then, after 3 months of using it, the benefits just kind of started tapering off or balancing out a little bit. And as you say, that's where kind of maybe the medium intensities come a little bit more relevant, because it's a lot harder to hit that ceiling. But talking about intensity as well, we've also now just launched the Accelerate Max. Why was that an important kind of addition to the range?
Yeah, so the Accelerate Max, and that was the high intensity option that I always wanted to launch at some point. We talk about the low to medium intensity with the Accelerate, the one that we designed and built in the UK, and to start a whole project again, to get a high intensity device to market here was going to be the intention and will maybe be the long-term intention. But the Accelerate Max, we do get manufactured for us to a specific specification. So, and that took a year. So it didn't take as long as 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
Speed to getting to market with high intensity range, that's the route we took. The risk we've got with that is we are working from an external manufacturer. We do have a supply agreement with them. However, we've designed a product that is perfect for, somebody else to white label if they wanted to. So that's the risk we've got. But we've managed to launch a high intensity PEMF device under the Accelerate range, which is working amazingly, but for a different application. So, when we talk about low intensity, the high intensity really for me, I think fits much better in a more professional setting. You get a lot of the same results with low intensity and high intensity. The difference is massive in price. And that's why a lot of the time we say to people, you don't necessarily need high intensity at home, but it's a different animal and you can get, different kind of outcomes slightly quicker a lot of the time, because I think with a high intensity device, you'll get an analgesic effect as well as the benefits of the healing. And by analgesic effect, we mean a little bit of pain blocking on top of the general healing that you get from PEMF devices. So people might get a little bit more of an immediate response from a high intensity device when it comes to pain. And also they can feel it. So that's a good thing in terms of putting it in a professional practice. If somebody's coming in and paying, money for a single session, if they come into a room and sit on a low to medium intensity device and nothing happens as far as they're aware, it's a little bit more difficult to explain to people what you're going to feel, what you're going to get from it. Whereas if you come in and sit in a chair and your body's jolting because it's a high intensity and it's actually making the muscles jolt, then it's easier for people to understand that something's happening. And they're more likely to come back and use it more consistently, more frequently, and then ultimately get the results from it. So it's a gap that we had with Accelerate range, that we did want a high intensity device. And we are constantly tweaking and redeveloping that. And something I can talk about, because hopefully we'll be launching it pretty soon after this episode, is some of the accessories for the Accelerate Max are just about to be released, looking really, really sexy. So we've got a new chair that's coming out, so that might fit into a wellness space a bit sexier. And we're just tweaking and redeveloping that product as we go. So yeah, more exciting things to come on the Max too.
Definitely. I know, the team are very excited for the chairs to come out and all the accessories and stuff. But not to dwell on this a little for too long, but just to throw it in with the Max and any high intensity really as a whole, there's two different ways that you can produce the magnetic field that these output, either via spark gap or solid state. And with the Accelerate Max, it's obviously solid state. What was the intention for choosing that?
Yeah, it's a good point actually, because when you're looking at a high intensity device, you've got spark gap and solid state, and it's a good differentiation to look for. Spark gap is traditionally quite old technology. Even though a lot of the newer products are using that technology, it's considered very old technology. It literally is a case of having two rods that become closer and further apart that create a spark, and that spark creates your pulse through magnetic field. What it's very difficult to do with the spark gap one is be specific with the frequency. So if you do want to change and select a specific frequency, it's a very difficult thing to do because it's very random and it will spark as and when it gets closer and further apart. And that determines how quickly and slowly it gets, but it's very difficult to actually keep that consistent. But it also means that the spark technology needs replacing quite frequently. And normally it's within a year or 2 years. It depends whether you're using it more frequently. So there's a lot more ongoing maintenance that goes on with spark gap chamber technologies. But with a solid state, it's a device that uses very little maintenance, and you can be very, very specific with the frequency. So, and it's a lot more newer technology. So really, if you are looking at a high intensity device, we would normally suggest looking for, a solid state. If you want that device to last longer, be more specific with the frequencies. And that's the route we took with the Accelerate Max.
Yeah, and again, I think that's where your kind of experience with NewMed comes in. Like, you've sold spark gap chamber devices in the past, and obviously you know about the servicing. It's just one of the other kind of benefits you've had of being able to sell a whole range of devices and now be able to translate that into kind of one product line as such. But talking about the last kind of 10 years in general, what would you say as a whole, some of maybe the biggest lessons you've learned about PEMF is, or the one big thing that maybe stands out about PEMF as a whole?
Yeah, it's a good question, because there's like a lot I think I've learned over the time. But I think the biggest thing for me and the biggest takeaway for the listeners is just to be consistent with PEMF therapy. It's like anything, if you're not consistent with things, you're not going to see those benefits. But, with PEMF therapy, some people just try it once, twice, and they're like, I haven't had the results that I want of this chronic condition that I've had for 20 years. So it's like, okay, well, maybe try and use it for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks consistently before you give that judgment. There's an example that I had, when I was right back in selling the original device, the Magnetovital product, really low intensity device. Lady was buying it for bone health because she had osteoporosis. She showed on a DEXA scan that she had a very low bone density. And, using PEMF therapy for like 6 months, she sort of said to me, I've been using this device for 6 months. I don't know if it's working, if it's not working. How do you know whether your bones are stronger? So it wasn't until she got to the 12th month that she had another DEXA scan and had actually seen for herself that the bone density had got stronger. So, and I just kept saying to her all the time, just keep using it, keep going. I promise you it will work. So yeah, consistency, I think, is the takeaway here.
Yeah, 100%. And I know when we do our bonus episodes, that's always really the takeaway that we say at the end. When you look at the studies, it's not a one and done therapy. It's weeks, months to actually get the result that you want.